He was one of the Federation's most respected commanders, serving from the outbreak of war, even signing the armistice personally. But how well do we really know the man behind the legend? How well do we really know Admiral Ross? Greetings, lore members, and welcome to this Dominion War special episode on Admiral Ross. This is the first in a series of videos where we're going to look at various commanders and key personalities in the Dominion War. Some of them we will be quite familiar with, and some of them we will be less familiar with. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So, William Ross was born in 2318. His parents, who were asteroid miners, his father was basically in charge of the business front, and his mother was really in charge of the management and logistics and organization. So his father was very much a sort of front of house kind of guy, negotiator, businessman, and his mother was very much a organizer. And she really ran the business behind the scenes. As a result of this, the young William Ross picked up a lot of skills in business management, in logistics, and negotiation. Now, interestingly, he didn't join Starfleet until he was 25, and through most of his time in the academy, and indeed in his early career, he very much felt like an outsider. He didn't come from a sort of traditional background that most Starfleet officers do. He came from a family that was sort of, on the periphery of most Federation society. After leaving the academy, he would serve on the USS Leonov, which is a Miranda-class vessel, and he served during the Zenkethi War. The ship was destroyed in battle, and he lost a lot of friends as a result of that. After that, he did a stint in Starfleet intelligence during the 2350s. And then he was the executive officer of the USS Ulysses, another Miranda class, in the final years of the Cardassian border war. So really, William Ross is a bit of an outsider. He's often overlooked for promotions. He kind of just slowly works his way up the ladder in a very much a background role. For the most part, people aren't taking too much notice of him. He's not a high flyer on most people's radars. However, after Layton's attempted coup, suddenly there's a lot of gaps in Starfleet's hierarchy because an awful lot of officers who were implicated in the coup ended up having to resign, and that opened up a lot of jobs in the higher command levels of Starfleet. There were a lot of people who were willing to go along with Layton's coup, and this really meant that Will being perceived as a sort of an outsider really actually helped him a lot, because he was very much seen as apolitical. He was neither much of a hawk like those of Layton, and he wasn't much of a dove either. He was shown to be a shrewd negotiator, but perfectly capable and willing to engage in conflict. He definitely wasn't a hardline pacifist, although his experiences, particularly when fighting the Zenkethi, definitely made him more risk-averse than perhaps other officers who were still quite hawkish. Not every hawk was behind Admiral Layton, to be clear, but often those were the kind of officers that Layton attracted, and so those were the kinds of officers that were lost as a result of the coup. He then took command of Starbase 375 in 2372, and that's where he would be up until the outbreak of war, whereon he would be involved in coordinating the fight back. Of course, that's something that we'll really be looking at in our regular episodes rather than here, but we can make a few observations on his personality. William Ross was really quite cautious by nature. Now, he could be persuaded, he was not stubborn, but he was most convinced by evidence. He wasn't someone who was easily taken in with words and with spin. He very much acted on what he could see and not what he was told. So he was very much sort of perceived as a bit of a wet or sober mind in terms of high command, and wasn't necessarily a big fan of big, bold, sweeping plans of grand offensives. He wasn't really that interested in those kind of ideas. He preferred to see things be proven on a smaller scale before thinking about opening them up onto a larger scale. he paid an awful lot of attention to logistics and support. He really wasn't much of a tactical theorist. He wasn't someone who concocted doctrine or really subscribed to doctrine. He subscribed to doctrine as a basic necessity, but he wasn't one of these officers who was very much obsessed with doctrine and developing these ideas, coming up with these experimental concepts of how to command a fleet and how a fleet can operate in different kinds of units. He was very much we'll stick with what works, and if adaptations emerge that we can use, we'll use those, but we're not going to completely restructure the fleet over nothing. So he paid an awful lot more attention to support in terms of making sure everything is in the right place. That was very critical in the early stages of the war. He was very, very good at getting ships, getting fleets, getting supplies where they needed to be ahead of time, and making sure that the retreating Federation fleets were able to stay one step ahead of the Dominion. And that was really something that Ross did a very good job of, although that often goes unremembered by most people. Most people only think about the counterattack led by Captain Sisko, but Ross was really instrumental in keeping Starfleet alive and in the fight in those very early months of the war. He was very interested in logistics, and he was very much seen, as I say, as a bit of a sober voice. As I say, he was not easily convinced by rhetoric. He acted on evidence and would be the guy to say, no, let's calm down, let's take it one piece at a time. Like I say, he could be convinced. And so, certainly by the end of the war, he was an awful lot more willing to entertain bold and aggressive ideas than caution, because he had seen his caution come back to bite him several times by that point. So he wasn't stubborn, he was willing to change. Fundamentally, he's only a few years younger than Picard. At the outbreak of war, he's only 56. So he's very much of that generation, which is quite different to men like Commander Sisko and Commander Riker, who are a bit younger and haven't quite seen the level of loss and shock that perhaps Picard and Ross's generation did. He was also a technological democrat. Now, what does that mean, a technological democrat? So there's this debate at the heart of Starfleet during the war as to what should be done with the cutting-edge ships. There's some people who say that what they should be doing is putting all these cutting-edge ships into a single fleet, and then basically use that as a tool of breakthrough. So just charge that at a specific point in the enemy line, use these elite fleets to break through the enemy line and just completely outfight them on a technological level. And then everyone else can sweep up behind, and it doesn't matter that the rest of the fleet is quite outdated. He didn't subscribe to that theory. He was a technological democrat. He far preferred to see the more cutting-edge ships be evenly distributed among the different fleets. He felt that was much better, not only for ensuring that everyone had a decent amount of fighting power, but also for morale as well. Although there were still some fleets that were still considered elite. It wasn't as explicit as it perhaps was in other fleets like the Klingon fleet and the Cardassian fleet and the Romulan fleet, which all had actual, guards units. He was also seen very much as a peacemaker among the Allies. He kept the alliance together, and bearing in mind what that meant keeping the Klingons, the Federation, and the Romulans all singing from the same song sheet. That's no small task, and I think that speaks an awful lot to Admiral Ross's people skills. He understood people and how to negotiate with them, and how to basically befriend people even when they wanted to, make an issue of something. He was very, very good at being a negotiator and a peacemaker. He was very good at standing in the middle and holding people apart when they wanted to get at each other's throats. Sometimes literally. So in that way, Admiral Ross was really quite accomplished. So not only was he a distinguished and very talented strategic thinker in terms of, how he organized the war effort, but also in terms of as a personality, something he was very good at as well was being personable, being a negotiator. He had 2 children, both of whom were serving in Starfleet during the war, one of whom was killed in action. And again, that plays a heavy part in his attitudes to the war and how the war should be fought. In any case, that's where our story of Admiral Ross ends. So, for much of his career, Admiral Ross was really an outsider, and it held him back. But at the time of crisis, he rose to the challenge, and he brought a vital, new fresh perspective. And it's worth remembering, of course, that Vulcan maxim, infinite diversity in infinite combinations. And diversity comes in many guises. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know who else I should cover from the Dominion War, and I will see you all next time.